Hello. We were waiting for Christy Mitchum, who was going to be doing an introduction, but I'm not sure she's joining us. So I'm going to step into that space and say thank you very much to everyone for joining us today. And thanks to Bloomberg for hosting this sustainability event, so incredibly important. It's almost 5 years since the Paris Agreement, and one of the things that has changed so much is the commitment and focus of the private and financial sectors to this whole question of sustainability and what we need to do to rapidly decarbonise the world. I'm in a moment going to introduce the panelists, who are the people that you have dialed in to listen to. But just a brief word about myself. I'm Claire O'Neill. I'm the Managing Director for Climate and Energy at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Before that, I spent 12 years in politics in the UK government and helped drive forward many of the UK's ambitious policy moves. But one of the reasons for coming out of politics and joining WBCSD, which has been around now for over 25 years, is that when we talk about rapid decarbonisation, improvement in sustainability, it's not just the how, so it's not just the why, it is the how. It's about how do we actually deliver on these solutions. And WBCSD was originally set up after the Rio Earth Summit in 1991 as the place where the private sector would come together to do sustainability, where we would collaborate. Of course, it was respecting all of the questions around competition law, but collaborate in a safe space to solve problems. One of the things we've learned as we really accelerate this decarbonisation journey is the importance of the whole value chain, the ecosystem that surrounds a particular company, and how important it is to collaborate along that value chain to decarbonise. And we have launched at WBCSD a programme which is called SOS 1.5, a Safe Operating Space 1.5. Of course, it's science informed. And we are working now with several dozen of our members to both help those members accelerate their own decarbonisation journey, but also work in ways that we can really amplify this collaboration through new tools, through new metrics, through ways of measuring emissions. So we are, I think, really providing the answers in many cases to how this decarbonisation is done. But what I'd like to do now is introduce three people who represent extraordinary companies who are seizing this desire to improve sustainability in their businesses, and also the opportunities that come from that. We've got a good cross section of businesses and regions. So we're going to be hearing today from Bayer, Matthias Berninger, who is the Chief Sustainability, is the Senior Vice President, Head of Public Affairs and Sustainability. Bayer will need no introduction, but just in case you aren't familiar, it is a massive global organisation focused on human and veterinary pharmaceuticals, consumer healthcare products, agricultural chemicals, seeds and biotech, and has been extraordinarily ambitious in the climate and sustainability space with, for example, aims to make production sites carbon neutral by 2030, and also focusing very much in the supply chain and a lot of innovation, particularly with those considered right at the bottom of the supply chain, the farming community. So very much looking forward to hearing from Matthias in a moment. We then have Mary Draves joining us from the USA, representing Dow. Dow, again, we talk about chemicals as these hard to abate sectors. This is also terribly difficult. Dow has set out to be one of the leading decarbonisation exemplars in this space. Very strong carbon reduction targets, intending to be carbon neutral by 2050 on scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions, which is an extraordinary lift for a chemicals company, and has also been amazingly innovative in this conversation about how do we reduce plastics waste, really innovating in the plastics and packaging space. And then last but by no means least, we're going to hear from Matthias Lelievre, who represents ENGIE Impact. ENGIE, obviously a French-based company, but operating right across the world, a #1 leading producer in energy from renewables, innovating into areas like floating offshore wind, and really working with its clients, not just to decarbonise its own footprint with very ambitious targets around its use of renewable energy, but working to also decarbonise its value chain. And I just did also want to highlight another really important goal, a commitment to gender equality in management in the boardroom, again, part of the overall sustainability agenda. So I'm going to turn first to Matthias with really a question, which is, tell us about your net zero strategy. How did this come about? What are the key opportunities that you saw? And how much does this working with your value chain accelerate the pace of action that you can deliver?
Yeah, thank you, Claire, for having me, and also for the opportunity to talk about a topic that is dear to my heart, but equally important to Bayer's company strategy. When I joined Bayer about 2 years ago, I did a back-of-the-envelope calculation. Bayer is a key player, for example, in the agriculture sector, which represents roughly 25% of all carbon emissions. The market share of Bayer Crop Science is roughly 25%. So you realize that the emissions in Bayer's value chain are close to those of India. And that just gave me an understanding how big the systemic relevance of a company like Bayer is in the space. Secondly, I think that companies have to put their strategy where their mouth is. So Bayer, like many other businesses, have welcomed the Paris Accord. They have agreed with it. But of course, in a consequence, you also then need to agree with the requirement of carbon reductions. So we teamed up with the Science Based Target Initiative, which I think gives a good framework for reductions, both in your immediate supply chain, scope 1 and 2, but also with your suppliers. And we have signed up to their 1.5 target degree goal. We also have signed up to the UN United Nations ambitions for business to be at 1.5 degrees by 2050 with the amount of decarbonization UN Act. How do we do that? Well, first of all, we really reduce our own carbon emissions through roughly $500 million investment in energy reduction and the purchasing of green energy. Dare I say that those who do that early on will probably get quite good deals on green energy, so it's not that costly to move to renewable energies, but 100% renewable strategy plus an investment in energy reduction is really important. We also innovate in new products that in the process require less carbon emissions or cause less carbon emissions. And we have committed to invest in carbon removal projects for the remaining Bayer emissions. So by 2030, our goal is to have achieved what the governments of Japan, the European Union, China, and hopefully the United States will set as a target, and that is to be carbon neutral or to reach net zero emissions by 2050. In the case of China, of course, 2060, but to be very honest, doesn't make that big a difference. A very important thing we have decided to do is to include decarbonization in the management compensation. So 10% of the salary of Bayer CEO, but also the top 500 in the leadership, will depend on achieving carbon neutrality by 2030. And our goal for the first 4 years is to remove more than 2 million tons of carbon out of our value chain in order to achieve the first milestone of our long-term compensation. But the single most important impact that we can have is an innovation in agriculture. In rice that emits less carbon, for example, methane emission, in short stack corn that will in the long run reduce the carbon emissions of the corn crop systems quite dramatically, in empowering farmers to remove carbon out of the atmosphere and store much more carbon in the soil. So in changing the paradigm of innovation just to increasing or securing yield per hectare, to also removing carbon out of the atmosphere. You see in the background picture, kind of the picture depicting this year's Chemistry Nobel Prize. 8 out of the last 10 chemistry Nobel Prize are in the area of the biorevolution. The last one for gene editing for Emmanuel Charpentier and Jennifer Doudna. We believe that the about 6 billion we invest every year in innovation needs to be fully geared towards achieving the global goals on sustainable development in the social space, but also in the space of decarbonization. We also believe that we need to invest heavily in increasing resilience. So farmers, like almost no other community, suffer from the effects of climate change. So how can we make sure that food systems are more resilient is another big topic for us at Bayer.
Thank you so much. I mean, and I just wanted to amplify a couple of points you raised. I think you highlight very strongly how doing something that is climate positive has so many co-benefits, and in particular the area of agriculture, which is both an extraordinarily deep pool of emissions, which often is not recognised, but also the ability to actually create different economic pathways, better yield, better soil sustainability from the work you're doing. So these co-benefits. Could I just go back just with a quick question? I noticed it was very interesting to hear about your management compensation structure being linked to decarbonisation targets. That is a move that I've seen some companies do, but it is by no means common. I also noticed that you have an external sustainability council. You were very committed to governance, if you like, of this journey, and also for transparency. We of course have the TCFD metrics that are there, and having this sense of the targets, the innovation and the investment, but also the governance and the transparency. How much do you think that means that Bayer's targets will be delivered? This ecosystem of support that you have put around the goals.
Yeah, for us, the Sustainability Council already has been proven invaluable because they also look at our innovation pipeline. So they ask the right questions. If you think about the top 50 companies in the world spend 310 billion euros on innovation every year. If those investments were geared towards achieving sustainability targets, we'd be faster in achieving progress on the SDGs. And that's a focus area for the Council. They also hold our feet to the fire. So what we heard just today about Brazil, that there are 11,000 square kilometers of deforestation of rainforests, is something that is not acceptable. So we need to stop deforestation. Otherwise, the conversation about decarbonization will fall short, because without those forest systems, we neither have the rainfall patterns people need, nor do we have the absorption of carbon. And therefore, this is something, a council where people like Braulio Diaz, who led the Convention on Biodiversity for many years, holds our feet to the fire, no pun intended here.
Thank you very much. Mary, I'm going to come to you because, again, the level of innovation that Dow has been investing in, particularly in the areas of plastics, but also looking also for new solutions for the sort of harder to abate processes. Tell us a bit about your company's journey and some of the sort of high points, if you like, lessons that others can learn.
Sure, I would be glad to, Claire, and thanks very much for having me today. I have a few graphics. We're going to bring up some slides to walk through this, but you know, our sustainability journey really began, and it stretches back to our beginning, really, with Herbert H. Dow in 1897. Mr. Dow was really committed to saving energy and reducing waste and focusing on our safe and efficient operations. You know, as we look at today, and we entered into our merger with DuPont in 2016 and concurrently spun out in 2019, you know, Dow continues at this time to double down on sustainability efforts, reaffirming our commitments to sustainability and accelerating our activities in sustainability across all of our operations. You know, so what does a one-year-old company with a 120-year-old history in sustainability look like? Well, it's fresh and newly defined, but also very purposeful and very familiar to many of us as we look at sustainability as a long part of our culture and our value system. As we take a look at how sustainability is infused in everything that we do, and this is Dow's ambition, you know, as we introduced our ambition, we want to be the most innovative, customer-centric, inclusive, and sustainable material science company in the world. And I think that this element of sustainability is closely aligned also to our ESG commitments, very similar to my colleague from Bayer, and how we set our strategy and frameworks. You know, as we look at our ambition, sustainability is not new. It's something that we've been doing for a long time and arguably is part of our culture and values for well over 123 years. You know, it really starts at the top. We have a very strong top-down commitment where we've leveraged many things. 30 years ago, we created a voluntary board committee that oversees our EH&S and sustainability performance and principles so that they're addressed in everything that we do. Our CEO is deeply committed and extremely passionate, talking about sustainability and executing against sustainability, spending 25% of his time on sustainability-related items. We've also established cross-functional ESG reporting teams that help us meet the disclosure opportunities and the disclosure expectations of our stakeholders. You know, and sustainability goes way beyond just these items, is that it's embedded in all of our businesses, in our business functions. You know, how do we deliver against sustainability? Our employees are also engaged in sustainability activities. You know, they are deepening their sustainability acumen by participating in our sustainability academies, and also they're able to participate in grassroots community of practice where they have an exciting, if they're excited about recycling or they're excited about a circular economy, they can become engaged. To further cement our sustainability practices and principles, an ESG metric has also been included in our performance award to further hold us all accountable for reaching these sustainability targets. You know, as we look at what is the foundation of our history, it's really about us setting ambitious sustainability commitments. And Dow is on its third set of 10-year goals in sustainability. You know, our first decade of sustainability goals was largely about our footprint. How do we work to reduce the impact of our operations? We saw dramatic reductions in energy consumption, greenhouse gas emissions, and water use. Our second set of goals focused on our handprint, really producing sustainable outcomes alongside our customers to address world challenges. And in these 2 decades, we saved over $6 billion of economic value, or they delivered $6 billion of combined economic value. We're now in that third set of sustainability goals, which really addresses our blueprint. And it's about collaboration with NGOs and governments, academics, to tackle global challenges and to really challenge our thinking. As we look at where we are now, in 2019, Dow completed its spinoff from Dow DuPont, and we set forth on this accelerated roadmap of our sustainability targets. And we asked ourselves, what are the most critical sustainability needs of our industry, and where can we make the most difference? What are the biggest issues that get at our license to operate, and which represent the biggest opportunities for the world writ large and for our customers? The answer really became circular economy, climate protection, and safer materials. Really a world that's carbon neutral and without plastic waste. Climate, as we know, and circular economy are among the greatest technical challenges that we have, and Dow technologies and products are critical to addressing both. We believe that a sustainable future is attainable, but only if we come together to address these issues. In June of this year, we announced new targets for protection of the climate and also for stopping waste and closing the loop in terms of plastic waste. So our protection of the climate was about us reducing further our absolute emissions by 5 million metric tons, and then becoming carbon neutral by 2050. Stopping the waste and closing the loop, enabling recycling through our actions and partnerships, and making all of our products recyclable. All of this in conjunction with our communities, with NGOs, and with other partners to make this happen. As we look at the comprehensive approach that we're taking to tackle carbon neutrality, no one size fits all in this area. So we're looking across several pathways because together they will be able to get us to the end result of carbon neutrality. So we're optimizing our facilities, processes, and developing low carbon technologies. We're developing materials that can help our customers reduce their own carbon footprint. To reduce emissions, we've created renewable portfolios. We are understanding carbon capture and sequestration capabilities in Europe. We're innovating new cracking technologies, and we're continuing to work on understanding where and how we can continue to improve our energy efficiency. Our objective, a resilient carbon portfolio, and increased long-term value, about decreasing our carbon exposure and working to optimize the entire equation. So meeting these targets will take innovation. We know that. Investment and collaboration like never before. And we need to work across the value chain with our customers and governments, and to manage both risk and regulation and create that value through science-based technology. Our focus is really on a dual horizon approach, balancing short-term progress with long-term solutions. Climate change is one of our greatest technical and social and economic challenges the world has ever faced. Our products and technology can help solve the problem and address both. As a leading material science company, we have a responsibility and opportunity to take action, and we're doing just that. And our new sustainability targets also align with Dow's purpose to deliver that sustainable future to the world through our expertise in material science and our collaboration with our customers and partners. So Claire, I really appreciate the opportunity to share Dow's story.
Thank you, Mary. I mean, a couple of things jumped out at me from that. One is your continual improvement. You as the CSO clearly managing to persuade the organization that you need to be refreshing these sustainability goals. I loved the idea of the footprint to handprint a blueprint. Many companies we know have not even yet set out their footprint. In fact, in a survey of 9,000 companies done by Boston Consulting Group, only 9% had actually set a target, and only 11% had even started to understand their own footprint. And lastly, your point about CEO commitment. One of the big things that gets the boulder rolling, we again understand from that work, is the commitment of the CEO, their desire to actually shape the organization and then to move the process along. But congratulations, a really fantastic story. Coming a little bit closer to my home again, coming back now to France to talk to Matthias from ENGIE Impact. You know, utilities have been at the forefront of this transformation because the decarbonisation of energy has been really the first mover for the world. Tell us a bit about what ENGIE is doing, and in particular, the collaborations that you're developing to really accelerate your journey.
Thanks for having me, and really glad to be part of this panel with great stories that my colleagues just shared. The story of ENGIE is kind of amazing as well, in the sense of really 5 years ago setting this ambition to reposition itself from a traditional energy player to be that global leader that support clients to accelerate their transition towards a carbon neutral world. And the big reason was, obviously for ourselves, a sense of responsibility. We by definition are a big emitter, and the second reason was the economic opportunity, and I will come back to that. But the first step of this obviously was our own footprint and our own transformation and reducing our own carbon footprint. So really what happened was really a first phase where we made significant progress with a massive portfolio rotation. So we divested, we shut down, we transformed all the assets that we used to operate that were heavily decarbonized, coal, oil, and we used the proceeds of this movement to reinvest massively into the technologies that are part of the future, renewables and centralized, decentralized, low carbon infrastructures. And we're talking here about, massive movements, tens of billions of asset of rotation. And we did that very fast, 4 or 5 years. And allow us to decrease, on top of, our own efficiencies and working on our behaviors, our carbon footprint by more than 50% over the last 4 years. And we are now on an SBT certified trajectory to continue to decrease that footprint in the next decade. Today, we have installed 25 gigawatt of renewable power, and we plan to add 3 to 4 giga per year. So, it's a massive opportunity and big volumes that we are talking about. And on top of renewables, we are an industry leader in key growth areas such as microgrids or electric vehicles, recharging infrastructures, because we believe that these are the next technologies and the next wave that are going to change massively the world, really. And finally, we have obviously our detailed plan to reach carbon neutrality. And really what is interesting listening to what Matthias was saying or Mary was saying, I think there's a lot of commonalities in the way we look at that transformation. The C-level engagement, it's really a vision led by our chairman, Jean-Pierre Clamadieu, and then by the executives of the group, and then the way to make it happen. Because it's nice to have targets, but really the challenge is to get to action and operations and change. And really the takeaway for me is first, reaching carbon neutrality, it's a massive transformation. Second, reaching carbon neutrality, it's both long-term planning and short-term obsession for action and results. And third, I would say, is the fact that carbon neutrality is a massive economic opportunity. And maybe I can spend a little bit of time on those three key areas, because I think that's really what we see with a lot of our clients as well. First, the notion of transformation. It's super transversal by definition. So it's not anymore on the side, about reporting and compliance, about influence internal, and it's across operations, it's across your finance, in your financial department, it's across your commercial department, the way you think at innovation, right? That was mentioned by Mary and Matthias before. So that holistic approach is key, and that's the way we approach it also internally. The notion of being strategic, I think we see that shift in the last 5 years. Those conversations used to be technical conversation. Now they are strategic conversation. It's a C-level conversation, and that really changed dramatically the focus and the willingness to see action and results. And the last thing is really around how do you organize internally so that you manage carbon the same way you manage cash in a company, in a way. So data driven, how do you make sure you really equip yourself to do that at scale? And so it means that you need to put the systems in place. And honestly, what we see in the market is that companies are not well equipped today to do that with the same level of rigor, transparency, and frequency that we need so that the day-to-day actions and trade-offs and decisions are taken always with carbon in mind, and then the leadership behaviors, right? Matthias mentioned already the alignment of incentives. How do you make sure that the incentives are set in a way that the behaviors of your teams are aligned not only to manage your bottom line in terms of dollars, but your bottom line in terms of carbon? So that's the transformation mindset that you need to change and really be consistent with a carbon neutrality ambition. Long-term planning, it's obvious, but we're talking 20 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years forward, so it's super long. And then at the same time, you need to show progress, like every 2 years, every 3 years, you need to show that reduction. So that need for operation is strong, and that's where it starts, honestly. And as ENGIE Impact, we surveyed our clients and all the large companies who set goals for themselves, and only 25% are really on track. Getting to operation is tough because it's super granular, it's super local, and so how do you do that and be successful with that is really a key challenge. And lastly, I would say for us, it's a massive economic opportunity. I talk about renewables briefly, but on top of that, there's really a digital opportunity. How do you really help with this idea of measuring right and at the right level of granularity? How do you have the right platform to do that? And we developed our own system that now we bring to the market to do that. And then it's the creation of ENGIE Impact 18 months ago to support our clients, have this C-level conversation, think about transformation business case, strategy, carbon roadmap, focus on action. What can you do now and what you should wait for? What are the technologies that are ready? How do you look at that market? And the more complex, the more global, that's where we come in and help more than 1,000 clients today in the world. And so we see a great momentum through our activity, which makes me hopeful that the world might be really on time for the next decade and really see that reduction that we all need to touch.